do you have anything that you would like to get into?
No.
Anybody else?
Problem solving?
Okay. Again, you're not referring to mechanical, I take it.
Right, right.
What are you referring to?
Life in general.
Okay. Well, the process is what you're really interested in. The first process that you have to do is identify. Can you do that? Well, how do you identify the problem? Some people don't even know. They don't feel good. There's a lot of things, but then they can't put their finger on it. So is that the question? How do you identify the problem first? You know what the problem is.
I don't have a specific problem in mind.
Okay. The first thing that you do is, as you go through life, as you go through various things, there's certain times and moments when tension and confusion come in. You identify those moments. When people look at you and wonder how you're dressed or whether you're concerned with that. There's certain things that begin to bug you, whatever it may be. If you're not given enough attention, whatever it is, you identify them, you write them down. Then, after you've identified the problems in there, whatever it is, you hold up an object that says, put it in a good place, no attention to it. And you feel it put down. Why do you put it in? Because quickly pay attention to it. Now, whether that's significant or not, it is a problem for the person that has that. Does that make sense? Well, the first thing you do is you listen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I, in shorthand, so you know what the areas are that bug you. You know, if you draw a picture and you show somebody great enthusiasm, well, my God, you're going to be popular, see? And you feel very put down. Well, you put that down, then you can identify, then you can work it. Now, let me go in and try to get the answers from you. The person looks at something that you created and pays no attention to it at all, and that makes you feel impressed. What's the problem? Well, talk about it. What do you think the problem is?
You're disappointed that they don't pay attention to it.
No, that isn't the problem. Think,
Why do I get depressed because they don't like it?
About it.
what do you mean? Elaborate.
That he needs the approval.
Right.
That he doesn't like what he created, but he
You
needs
need
the approval.
approval from others. You're not concerned with what you're doing.
The thing like this, the only reason I would do that is because sometimes, but sometimes you need what's called extra stimulus. You're down.
Yeah.
It's like you got this thing that you wrote, whatever this movie, you know, it's getting a little bit monotonous. And you need somehow an extra, you know what I mean, to get yourself going a
That's
little
the problem.
bit. Isn't that a problem?
No. The problem is that you need approval.
That's true.
Then you're
They
not
get you
interested in what
going.
you're doing. You're not interested in what you're doing.
Yeah, you are, but you need a little push.
You see, you depend more upon the other thing than what you're doing. So if you want to make a cork remover, so you can't get caught at the bottom, and you present the early approach to that problem, so when they say, it'll never work. That means that you have a habit, or a series of habits, that always turn in a given direction, seeking approval. The first thought that you get, and most of the so-called polished people or experts flounder. They try to simulate a condition, and it doesn't work, and they do it again, and it doesn't work, and they do it a half-assed way again, and it works a little better. Then they work at it again, it works a little better, and they do it something. Then they present it, so that's what we want. But you sometimes present a lot of half-baked, unsolved things to people. You know what I mean? And that's why they get my challenge is, don't you think you can get a better effect of a rocket taking off? And they usually say, how? Well, I haven't thought of it, and no contribution is being made. And a lot of people don't know the difference between genuine contribution and a series of words that are hollow. For example, this business we were talking about earlier about the handicap, hire the handicap. There are a hell of a lot of jobs, like a cashier, the movie theater, or a guy in a wheelchair, can handle that quite easily. A lot of jobs in the post office where you can have a circulator and the guy pockets a mail from a seat. There are many jobs that are static. And there are many people that are physically active that don't like to sit for a long period of time, and these people would work within a seated capacity, covering the range of education. All that education is relatively static, especially, in your posture and position. So you can name a whole batch of areas that don't require physical movement, that don't require the movement of the hands, whatever it may be, and listen. Then you know what the handicap, so-called handicap, can do. What's a handicapped person? A handicapped person is not one that can walk around. The person can walk around real well and speak very well, but not communicate. Because the people they're speaking to don't know what the hell they're talking about. So identification of the problem is not that you take an English course. It's to study communication. That means whatever that means in terms of the area you're trying to cover. Okay. We identify the problem, and we know that what seems to be the problem is more or less something in our attitude which we require of other people, which has nothing to do with other people. Now, let me give you an idea of how the world of Alex would look to me if I were a visitor from another world listening to Alex. Okay? Here's Alex, and here's the visitor. Okay. Alex says, Euripides Smede doesn't approve. This visitor would think that a portion of Alex's brain and whatever Alex considers good is in the head of the observer. In the same structure, the same identification. He said, I married Louise, isn't she wonderful? And the guy having the same set of Alex says, of course she is. I consider no one else. And Alex feels privileged. And then Alex says, hey, what do you say? We all go out and enjoy a place like the old fairgrounds, ride the rides and the other. And this guy says, now wouldn't that be the thing to do? And I get very pleased. You make some kind of assumption rather than put forth to someone else, I would like to spend Saturday afternoon sailing. How do you feel about it? That's the invitation of participation. Rather than let me tell you something that's really great. You're making the assumption that your concept of greatness is in the cerebral processes of someone else. And that's the most difficult thing to learn. Somehow, you see a child run over by a car and say, the mother must have been shocked. Assuming the mother loved the child, needed the child. We make a lot of assumptions. A lot of people weep when they go to a movie because they make assumptions. If you could just show a portion of the movie, let's say a guy is choking the girl, let him breathe, and he chokes her to death. And during that period, we make all kinds of assumptions. We resent, we feel angry. Then the movie goes on and goes back from that time. And it shows in the concentration camp, this person who was choking, jabbing people at the edge of the bed for years. And this guy trying to the wall, you know what I mean? And he's watching all that. And it shows other cruelties. Then years later, they encounter that person. They walk that street, and they follow him in the hotel room and choke him. You say, choke him more. But the first assumptions we make are always related to what we see. And we make no allowance for another arrangement in anybody else's claim the case. That's what a judge is completely incapable of doing, it seems to me. And so, what is the problem with the viewing audience? That the story, they've only seen the last part of the movie, or the first part of the movie. This is the problem. So, if you can understand, if you can cut, or attempt to cut, the idea that other people are connected with you and identify with all your problems. Most people have general areas of identification. Children are about to be beaten. Their arms are about to be broken. Or the mother doesn't love a child and can't handle it. She can take it to a certain age. There are many mothers that don't know that. They don't know there are people that assist in that area. They don't know that the assistance is readily available. In fact, if you come to someone and you don't beat your child, you say, I'm uptight, they say, well, do you beat your child? No. Do you feed it? No. Yes. Well, there are other people that have problems. You've got to tend to them because they will leave you from. It's only when you start choking your child that they fall. When you go to a hospital and say, well, I don't know, I have difficulty moving my arm, and the doctor examines, takes an x-ray, and says, I can't find anything wrong with you. He's going to let someone else come in that really needs work done. Well, you can have the early symptoms of anything the doctor does not diagnose. And now you get another pain, you don't want to go back because the guys have to call you something else. That's right. Now, a doctor says, I can't find anything. However, there may be many things that we don't know about. There's phantom pain that is just as real to a person with phantom pain. I think when a person is lying in bed at night, they see their dead grandmother come in and say, you haven't treated me right when I was alive. This is due to their own guilt. Now, to them, that's real. They can't sleep at night. They're troubled, and that's real. You don't say you're having illusions. First, you have to deal with the nature of guilt. You have to deal with what it is and how it comes about. So these people that you're talking to and say, then does that mean that thus and so and say, let them put it together. And after they put it together, then you have to practice and get off their problem and go to someone else that has a problem they have long solved. So you have areas that you don't have any problem with. You want to draw, you know where to get your pencil, you don't have to find the answer. But there's some areas you don't have to find answers. You don't know how to find answers in. And so you feel insufficient. And you never seem to remember, why is it that we don't remember our sufficiencies? And this is a very significant thing in the behavioral sciences. The reason why we don't remember our super sufficiencies. What is the reason?
Because they're there. We don't worry about it.
It flows so well. I mean, when you go in the kitchen, you grab the gas, turn the faucet, water goes in, you walk over, settle it, it doesn't spill over. You handle those so well that the areas you can't handle stand out, flaming. And so you think you're a problem person. You don't know how many you've solved. It's so easy for you to solve certain types of problems. Other times, well, you have no facilitation. And instead of saying, I don't have the facilities, the background, the methods of solving those problems, you keep this track going. Am I a dummy? What am I going to get out of it? I'm always making trouble. I'll amount to nothing. And so you build up an organized system of chaos. I mean, it's really organized, but it doesn't go anywhere. So I'm really suggesting, when you review yourself, self-criticism. When you do, instead of downing yourself, saying, okay, these are the areas I can't do. Meeting with other people, relating with other people, because we don't tend to relate with other people. We come at other people with a particular thing. You see that goddamn anchor? You know, and you go on and tell them all about it, and they're really not that interested. And so, and you feel, here's the thing that I can't understand. This is true. If I have a swollen ankle with great intense pain, and I tell Joe, it's so obvious to me, it seems that John would know. He really doesn't give a shit. His ankle. He says, I'm sorry to hear that. What can I do to assist you? He says, nothing. And I keep walking about like that because the pains we all have are obvious. And we assume that this man immediately suffers with every step I take. He doesn't really. Although he says he doesn't really suffer. Okay? Now, if I come in, I'll show you all the bills I've got. This isn't a painting. That's enormous. I bring in 2 more bags. You only people remind me. That's a tremendous problem. Now you admitted to it. You added to it. It's the same story. I'm going to use growth, you know. I'm going to use you. You've got a growth on your arm this size. And you come over to Rose and you go, look at it down there. Rose says, I can understand. She takes a blouse off and there's one on her back. About that size. And you say, I didn't know how well I was. And then you're interested because there's some kind of identification. Okay. Now, the question is whether or not we really need that kind of identification. Whether or not we can surpass those simple things that we've been doing all our lives. So, how would I feel if you invited me for dinner and you did the thing I talked about in session? You put the pie on the bottom of the plate, a piece of wax paper, then you put string beans in a wax paper, and then you put the salad and some wax paper, all in one bowl. So when I get through with the salad, I peel it away, and there's the vegetable, and then I get through it, and I peel it away, there's the apple pie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I walk out, and I say, all in the same goddamn dish.
No, I don't.
Wait. And she covers that leaf. She can put this down, that down, but no, that. You see? No. I am also annoyed by the fact that she gave me a nice spoon and fork. When I got through eating string beans, she didn't bring me another fork. And she said, don't they all meet in the same place anyway? What do you get into, the ice cream, the whipped cream, the apple pie? They're all the same. Why all the different forks? Because some asshole had started it that way, and we pick it up. We get concerned about how we're to be received and how we're to be accepted. And that's part of the great thing. The people that don't give a damn, that can afford it, you know what that means? You have to be in a position when you say, we're shooting the picture and I want all the extras over on the left side of the studio. So they say, who's he? He's directing the picture. You get all that? Oh, do you? You may say, well, that's ridiculous. And the guy says, what's your job? Who's that? I'm a grip. He says, get that guy out. They go on and they do their picture. The concern, a director of a picture knows what they want to do. They're appointed by the studio to do that. It doesn't mean that they're right. But if you get up and criticize that guy, that's not the place for it. You might in your head say, the next time I shoot a picture, I'm going to do it this way or that way. but dissecting the other person unless it's in an informative course on procedural technique. Does that make sense? Now, some people do this. They review something in their head. Remember that old shit about think before you speak? They review a concept in their own head the way someone else is doing something. And they now convince themselves that the way the other person is doing it is wrong. And they're so convinced, they may be right. They're so convinced that the other person, all they have to do is hear it, and they will modify it immediately. So this person comes at them with great gusto and says, you don't think those people off to the side. You know, you don't have to do this and that. And that person hasn't given it all the thought they have given it to. Any suggestion you make, it may be a good suggestion. You gotta know that other people are preoccupied. They're trying to get that goddamn fan away from walking, see? And Don comes over and he says, have you ever thought of changing the fucking fan light? And I'm angry because I want to get that fan out the shade. I haven't turned around and said, have you any suggestions for the problem? Then it's open. The brain is really open to hear. When a person's working on something, they're probably even ahead of that. They're going to buy to get a screwdriver, and they're going to take some wax, and they're going to wax the shaft, but they don't have oil. Then they're going to take this thing out. They got a whole procedure going. When they listen to you, it's an interruption to the procedure. So it's hard for a person to listen to you when they get started on a procedure. See if you can understand that. Because no procedure works in moment by moment. The person is somewhat ahead of themselves. You know what I mean? And when they try to listen to you, it's a jam in the flow of associative systems. I'll show you what I mean. Your intervention in the flow of associative systems is what causes the person, well, what is it? You know what I mean? So whenever they say that, I say, we'll discuss it later. And when they get through, over a cup of coffee, then you can discuss it and you can hear it. There are times that are not appropriate to attempt communication, even with God. If he's busy creating the mood, he's not about to be concerned about those things. So you have to time your question, which is very difficult. Most of us are inconsiderate. We're contemptuous of other people. We don't even consider that they might be thinking about things. We come right at them and say, this is what you want to do. If the person sits down and says, can't handle it, then you the person is like this. Can't get that thing right. That means that they haven't got an answer. At that time, you can suggest something. Because they're fizzling with you. I got 3 kids, one of them is there, one's out there, I don't know what the older one is. And then they sit down. Hey, you can come in. I says, let me tell you what I'm going to do with that stuff. You see? That means that the person is riding a pre-established path. I'm going to twist that fucking kid's arm until he learns to listen to me. And if he doesn't do that, I want to kick his ass out of the house. They have a procedure. We don't agree with the procedure. But that's not the time for intervention. So you have to learn. You have to look at other people and say, is this the appropriate time? Now, how many of you feel you might be guilty of moving in before a person is receptive? Now, how many of you feel you do try to take that into account? How many people feel that you do try to take that into account? That's a hard thing to do. Because the problem immediately causes you to say, what the fuck are you doing there? And the guy there's a dead rat on the floor. Ooh, I'm sorry. But you walk in, look around, and say, is there a problem? The person says, yes, there's a dead rat. Now what the hell are you doing there? Okay, the guy walked up. There's a bottle of stripping acid on your floor. You want to burn a hole. See? The point is, what are you doing there? Not what the hell are you doing. Now, it seems that we all have an established pattern of what ought to be. And this is a major problem in our civilization. That we are not simply civilized. We just come at things. So, and the first thing is identification of the problem. The second phase is making an adjustment to that. And if you can't, to seek out probable adjustments. That's the next one. After that is solved, you go on to the 3 views. Or you go on to your perspective, you move ahead. Whatever the problem is, you go down the line. Now you might come back and say, I tried those goddamn things I came up with, none of them worked. Now here's what that means. But there may be other avenues, and I'm sure there are. You say, well, how many goddamn things do I have to try to get that to work? As many as you have to try to make it work. I'm sure you've put acoustical systems up and got cool results. I'm sure you've changed it and got some other half-assed results. I'm sure that has happened. And so if that happens, the only adjustment is to find closer approximations of solutions, not the answer. The answer will kill anybody. People that are looking for the answer die. But all you look for is closer approximations to the solution to your problem. Now, as close an approximation as you can select as a solution to your problem is a picture of the amount of tools you have to approach that problem. There are many people that will not tackle the problem. They'll do this, or they tackle a problem differently. John is interested in glass blowing, shaping glass for some end goals that he has. Maybe they are clear, maybe they are general. So instead of tackling anything, he goes right in and says, what is the fundamentals of glass blowing? And somebody says, well, you have to rotate the glass, and you hold this direct and blow, you drift down, you hold it straight down and turn it over. They give him bit by bit. So he accumulates enough bits, and he's now ready to blow. And he starts blowing glass and it pops. He's wondering how do you start blowing? And then he gets other bits, and then he goes back and does it again. But you have to keep going out after this. Well, that's the answer to the problem. All right, now, when I get back to photography, because that's always a problem with people. Like I mentioned before, they go to Washington, D.C., and there's the Capitol in the background, too. And they photograph that place. And they got Aunt Minnie and Uncle Harry on the steps and all that. And the photograph's only about that size. And you don't know that's Aunt Minnie and Uncle Harry. They're shadows, dark circles, and photos with you. And you proceed to tell people who that is. Rather than photograph those people up front in the Capitol in the background. You only see a big water fountain and all these fucking rollers standing around, a gigantic photograph, and you can't see anything. And so, to them, they know who it was, and they know when they stood back, there was New York, and he sneaked there with a lollipop in his hand. All that is already structured cerebrally. When they take the photograph, they take it back with a great enthusiasm, and though you know all that was going on related to that photograph, there's nothing in there that you know. And so you say, yeah, it's true. That's a combination, and it's false. As false as this concept. So, also you got to know that other people are not interested in communication. They really aren't. Because otherwise they say your big fat photograph is Uncle Harry. Then they show you a little dot in the background and say, that's Uncle Harry in the background. How many people do that? They don't do that at all. The reason why most people don't do those things is because they always don't get a ground line shot in their lives. Most elevations that architects drive are eye level. Eye-level view of an interior. Why should they draw a mouse's eye view of the interior? Or you see the underside shot of a chair like that. You know, you can't sell furniture like that unless you sell bottom of furniture. You know what I mean? How to bottom your furniture, put the staples in there. So architects rarely shoot. But if you're going to do a movie on the life of a cat or a rat, it might be a good idea to do that. So our life and viewpoint are eye level. Our verbal customs are at social levels, the levels of our social culture, developed levels I'm talking about. Concern levels about the underprivileged people of the world are probably a humanist package. The humanist has that type of orientation. Now, how many people are going to concern themselves with any viewpoint other than ours? Because we are conditioned at this level. Stereophonic sound, John, on the top view of your own head. Did you know if you had your ears out here, like a sort of theodolite camera, things like that, do you know what you would get? Do you have an idea what you might get? If your ears were out about that far apart?
You have separation involved as far as noise coming in.
What does that mean? Elaborate a little more.
You would be able to pinpoint, instead of it, it's like stereoscopic vision, instead of focusing in on one point, is that with the ears, is that the sound would be dispersed and it would be coming in at different times?
You can gain your distance. Two people at 200 feet apart, one 175 feet apart, you would know the difference by this wide angle that you have here, the angle of convergence of the sound source. So what happens, we don't allow for those things. That's why the medics always say the human body is very well constructed. But it would be interesting to have a medical conference on engineering the body or re-examining the validity of anything. whether it's necessary for a violinist to move the bow up and back, or whether the bow ought to move up and back under the guidance and pressures of the violinist. Well, the very fact that you bring that up annoys people. The very fact that you bring anything up outside of the pattern system, because the head has a pre-pattern system that's always there. This includes me. It's very difficult for me to listen to new ideas without running them through this set. Although I think I've heard a wide variety of ideas, I think I've listened to them. I may not have. Nobody can tell me that unless they know more about the habit patterns than I have. So I run through a set of ideas and compare it to my own experiences. We all do that. And so if your experiences are very sophisticated, and you can listen to people on many different levels of understanding, it doesn't mean that the other people have similar equipment. You can provide them with it, not immediately, by handing them Mind in the Making and other books, and they will eventually accumulate a set. And those people make this kind of mistake, or they have a shortcoming. They've accumulated these bits by experiencing a great deal. And you walk over to those people, and you try to dump the great deal in their lap. They can't press it. They can't file it appropriately. How do you file things on anatomy and physiology if you don't know anything about it? You don't know whether the kidney should be in the gland department or in the organ department. If you don't have that kind of information, you don't know how to file it. And if you give a guy a box full of electronic parts and tell him to put them in appropriate drawers, all you can tell him is to match the parts. But the guy can't put them in the appropriate drawers. How do you put your value system in the appropriate compartments? How do you put, in your own head, you can put your values in appropriate compartments. And then when you deliver them, here's how a speech comes, which you deliver. In normal people, it's A, B, C, D, E, F, G. In a person outside of the normal patterns, it's A, C, K, W. You know what I mean? They think you're disassociated. Like somebody comes up and says, John, you know, these goddamn kids are crazy. The crimes and the things they do against your own folks. He says, have you ever considered social environment? I'm not talking about that. And all these fucking criminals out there. He's going off, and the guy says, what the hell has K got to do with what the hell? I'm not talking about that at all. I'm talking about something else. So how do you talk to another person? You have to learn about their simplistic orders of concern, the way they live with other people. Do you want to do that? You want to be a human engineer? You want to walk over and say, what is their order of extrapolation? How do they think? Or do you want to just come at people? Alex, in many instances, one of your problems is you just come at people. You hardly take the time to say, I wonder what their order of thoughts are. You may not be able to afford that. You know what the hell I mean that? Emotionally. You may need a pat on the back rather than say, hey, this might be interesting. Try to figure out how you do that now. If you want to get the guy's head at the right angle and say, where's the vanishing point? You know what I mean? Now, you have to do the same thing with people. I want to make contact with another person. Other people seem to enjoy an inquiry, a light inquiry into their interests. What are you interested in? What do you like to do? Is that right? Have you ever traveled? And they tell you about that. They like to talk about where they've been. But if you come at other people and tell them where you've been, they don't always care. They like participation. That's why at these sessions, sometimes people say, well, you do all the talking here. How can somebody else say that? Well, sure they can, but situation. During the question period, okay. And the point is, it's not a discussion group. Now, there are some people that have similar values, and when they get together, you can have a discussion group. I don't think you can have a discussion with anyone. I don't. Sit down and have a discussion. You'll have to take on and say, no, well, let's look at it this way. What do you mean by that? From semantics point of view. You can't sit down and have an up-and-back discussion. They can. You think you can?
Yeah, it depends on the circumstance.
Yeah, but it's very difficult for you to sit down and have a discussion. You must assume that they don't know certain things, and you've got to break them in before you can have a discussion. Does that make sense? Now, here's kind of a crude example of that. A crude example is you find yourself shipwrecked on an island, and the next ship doesn't come in for 7 years. Well, you're going to say to these people, okay, how do I eat? How do I go about it? How do I swim? How do I operate an outrigger canoe? And you're going to have to learn from them their gibberish until you can gibber some kind of communication. They don't come up to you and say, well, We got to learn your language. You're the one. You're the victim. You're the one that has to make the changes. All right, in relation to a personality that is disturbed, meaning a high degree of friction at different points. You have to try to figure out the friction generators, the linguistic inhibitors, whatever the hell it may be, identify them. I don't know whether or not that gets to you at all, does it? In relation to a question? Anybody have any questions about that? All right, then again, what is the next thing that happens when we walk out of here? How is it that we don't apply these things? That's another major problem. Why we don't apply them. Anybody know what that is? There's a tendency in all of us not to apply those things. That system.
Because we're not really practicing, we're just listening.
Okay. How is it that we don't tend to practice?
We're so introverted in our own thoughts, our own feelings, that we don't consider what their problems might be or what they might be.
How would you suggest that you might generate that attitude in yourself? Like a point or a system? What type of thing would you do? What type of mechanism, behavioral mechanism, can place that portion where you look at the other person and run a new habit? What do you think you can do?
Think before you.
What does that mean? Elaborate.
I mean, think. I mean, before you, let's say, instead of impulsively say something, kind of put a, step back and say, kind of.
What do we have here?
Okay, now knowing what that means, what do we have here, means this. When you get in a car, you shift gears. When you see a plane, your handling system is entirely different. When you get into a motorboat, your handling system is different. When you're on a sailboat, your handling system. You look at the thing and accommodate. But with people, we don't. We just go right in there and just step right in and over everything. I'm saying that most of us do this. We're not aware of it because other people do not say, just a moment, I'm not interested. Don't show me a picture of your grandmother. I'm not interested. They don't say that because that causes friction, irritation, problems. But when you come onto my boat and you look for the gear shift, or you look for something you see in the car, you can't operate the boat. So you have to say, I don't know anything about how do you handle it. Then you come for orientation. You go to an operating room and you say, well, I think I'd be in the way. Because everybody there seems to know what they're doing. You see? And I'm sure you have a lot of people around some technical level which they feel clumsy, awkward, and not capable of participating. There are sometimes things like that occur, perhaps at a free-thinkers meeting where people are sitting around discussing levels of values, and a newcomer comes in that has never been exposed. Here's what happens in that case. They come in and they want to develop their intellect. So they sit down and they listen to these people discussing population density, or I'm too dumb for that shit, and they go out of that meeting. They walk out because nobody at that meeting attempted to take them from A all the way up to where they're at. So people walk out, and they walk out at that type of situation. When you meet a person, you're at their home, and you verbalize, they can walk out too, but not leave the area. They walk out cerebrally. They sit back and say, well, look, would you like a cup of coffee? And you get into something heavily intellectual. And I don't know anything about politics, I don't care about it. Now, let me show you what Aunt Minnie says. And they come in, and they'll divert, because they're walking out. And then you won't get invited back if you continue that process. Now, do you want to be invited back? What is it that you want? What is it that you think you need? Do you need approval or to get information for us? And if you try to get information for us and it doesn't take, you have to sharpen your facilities. And you can't do it on that. I'll take it while you're already bumps it up. If you came at us and there's a new way of thinking, whack, and again. That shit's got to go. And then you pick up new tools. When you come back to that other person with the new tools, they already are a little angry at you. You understand? So you got to try them with somebody else. And if there's somebody else, part of the new tools work. They wave flags and say, you've enlightened me in 9 areas, but there's one thing I'll never agree with. And you mark that down. And then you try that presentation only on the third person. And that works. And then you try this one and say, that I'll never accept. So what you do is accumulate. That's how you become well-facilitated. You experiment. You try it, but don't try it on the same person 3 times, maybe twice. You're through. You've lost the game. then you gotta go out and try it in a new field. Do you know why? Why can't you stay with the same person cleaning the well? Because habits are already established. Reactions are already established. Does that make sense to you? Okay. If you had a very excellent ballet instructor, a ballet dancer, who wasn't able to instruct, you can learn to dislike ballet. Suppose they're perfectionists and they put you down in every instant of motion. I mean, that much, hardly any reinforcement, you might give up ballet. But if a ballet dancer can sit back and say, well, first time, my first experience 20 years ago, it's hard to do that. We become expertise in certain areas, and we lose that. As we grow older, we lose that. We lose the memory, actually, there. And there was a writer that I had talked about occasionally at sessions, and a couple of brothers. I just can't think of the name. But this guy used to write in a strange way to me. He'd write about this old man who lived in a little house in the country and had a couple of apple trees in his front yard. And he'd come out of the house in the morning and there were children climbing up the apple tree taking apples. And he'd run in the house and get his cane, he'd chase them off the tree and down the road. Then he'd turn around and he'd laugh. He said, I used to do the same thing when I was a kid. I don't believe that. I think he's forgotten. Oh boy, I ain't damn kids. He doesn't say, you know Ben Heck? You know Ben Heck, the writer? He always has people so, with such a total memory and oversight over everything that they seem to recall that. A kid stealing an apple from the stand, and a guy running after the guy do the same thing. They don't have all those packages of associative memory. Maybe when you were 17 years old, you might have taken a hubcap because it had the English seal of arms on it, and you never saw a hubcap like that. You sure like to put it on your car. You get the school and the kids and look, hey man, that's a terrific set of hubcaps. But now that he's 21, and you say, didn't you once steal hubcaps? He was not a guy with a black band over his eyes and robbed a hubcap. It is not the same type situation. And there are some people that have done things when they were a kid. They climb up to an old shit house and they look in the window and a girl was shitting or pissing. And now they're ashamed of it. 27 years later, they're ashamed of what they did. That's where they were then. I tell you something. If you say, you know Fresco does? He grabs his shit and he rubs it over his face. He said, well, that's terrible. When he was 6 months old. And you go back in time and describe it. But we have grown out of events that we don't want to do. And so how can you be ashamed of a set that had occurred in 1927, or 1935, or 1945, or 1960? That was a set at that time. So to look back at yourself, here's what people are doing. Alex has a mental set at this time. And he goes back 20 years ago. This isn't true. And he's had some pattern over here that he's never liked. And he's always felt ashamed of it. Because he felt at that time it was in his head, but he didn't use it. This must be that. It must have been in your head, but you never used it. How could I have been so stupid or so narrow-minded? That just proves that you stepped out of that road. Whenever you say, well, somebody knocked the door and I closed the door, there's a lot of robberies in town, it was your Aunt Minnie. Son, tell you that Aunt Minnie's in there. It was a hippie with long hair, and you just didn't recognize it. They had a beard and everything, and you slammed it on the face. Because of 9 robberies committed by him. Finally he says, you know, Aunt Minnie, this is Joey. Oh, yes, I want you to shake myself. Whatever the hell you do, in fact, if I open the door, somebody slams in my face. They say, oh, and I say, think nothing of it. I leave. I don't say, I assume that there must have been some structure that generated that. Now, if that doesn't make sense to you, raise your question. Does a person have the right to slam the door in the face? That's a legal question. That's a question that's unrelated to anything. After all, I've done so many wonderful things for John to get at least call me Saturday. Well, that kind of thing that I demand of John is unrelated to John. He's not a Saturday caller. And I must learn to evaluate those things. And this is because we have contempt for other people that we become sick of us. Let me say that again. We have contempt for other people. This is how we get sick. Contempt for other people means I always say what I have to say and I don't listen to anyone else. And I get pissed off at their reactions and I say it's no use talking to people. There's no use for you talking to people. With your limited and locked set, this is the problem, children. If you're talking about problem solving, this is a highly oversimplified statement of the nature of that kind of phenomenal behavior. Now, are there any aspects of that kind of phenomenon you'd like clarified? Certain areas that are on the borderline. You want to know what you think you ought to do.
When you speak of contempt, in many cases,
Self-concern, that's what I mean by contempt.
All right.
There's no eye out for the difference in
right,
values.
but still, it seems as if, like, when you go out into an environment and certain events occur, and they impinge upon the nervous system, and then you have a reaction toward it, and afterwards, you say, well, you know, the way I reacted into the situation without taking, you know, without stopping and saying, what have we got here? It's an automatic reaction.
That's right.
Now, the idea is, you know, I find it difficult to condition the nervous system.
But I was talking about a ring, and then you don't wear rings.
No, I don't think so.
A very simple ring that you wear. And whenever you say it, it reminds you, just for a while, that whenever you're talking to them, you're going to see that ring, because you're not aware of a ring. It just reminds you, what have we here? Am I too hard? Do I listen? You wear a ring, or something you usually don't wear. That's the gadget that you have to use, since you can't.
Okay, what you're trying to do is divert the attention off of an immediate thing that may bring about conflict.
That's why you need a ring. You may need a ring. You may need a ring. I don't know. Maybe some people have the ability to maintain that presence, that cerebral presence. Maybe they hadn't worked too hard. Maybe it was conditioned product in their upbringing. You know what I mean? No. How do people become attentive and concerned? By bringing up children in an area where you tell the children something related to an end goal and how to get there, and you also know that they want to get there. But if they listen carefully, they will all get there and go horseback riding or sailing. But everything you say has a deliverance that they have need for. So, if you arrange 20 classrooms that had great after delivery for those kids, well, you put them in any new classroom and they will listen with great attentiveness. You don't have to rap and say, pay attention. No, if you get a bunch of kids, say 11 years old, and say, I want your attention. Now, Euripides Smee built the first cannon in Virginia, 1804. They don't give a shit about that. And the kids start wondering, because you say, you know, who put the first American flag together? Betsy Ross. They don't give a shit. And so, they start wondering, the teacher raps, I want your attention. And if the kids look, it doesn't mean that they're giving their attention. The teacher's so ignorant as to make an assumption, the kid's sitting on his hands, that they're listening. Very increased people listen, they wonder. While I'm talking, while you're talking, they shake their head and wonder. This is normal for people to wonder. So if I were in a classroom and I were doing something and one of the kids wasn't paying attention, if it was important that they pay attention, I would pick up some object, and hold it up and say, look at the hole. And I then you get into hydrodynamics, or whatever it is. But you've got to be able to have that facility at hand, or at least arrange your classes with people interested in boats, geology, or something else, knowing something about it. Now, if you went down to Miami Beach and had a convention on how to control, how to subvert the high cost of groceries, and how to shop at 1/3 the cost, you're going to have a hell of a lot of people that are making notes. But if you start discussing oscillations in the orbit of Venus, at that same discussion, one person might stand up and say, Professor, that's most interesting. Most interesting. But how do you say, money shopping? And that doesn't mean that they're most interesting. They say, I can't afford that information right now. I'm not even interested. I want to know how to shop economically. So there are all kinds of people that are shopping continuously. Some go to school and they're shopping for information. Some go to a psychiatrist, shopping for methodology. Consider it going shopping to solve certain problems. Now, there are many people that go shopping with their own grocery list, at their own prices. A can of coffee, 90 cents. It's in their head. A can of beans, 12 cents. That's in 1927. And they go in the market and they look at the price and are outraged by the price in their own head, not the price on the coffee can. So whenever you go to a barber shop and give a guy a quarter for a haircut today, I think the guy would say, we don't accept tips. Whatever it is. Because the outrage is your own concept. So it might be possible to understand then that all our outrage against ourselves and against other people is by a pre-structured concept that we're unable to yield. Now you might walk in a grocery store and comment. And a can of coffee was 49 cents and now it's only $3. And then you can say, well, it's a jump on whatever you want to do, 300%, 20%, whatever the jump is, that's the fact. And now the next thing is, I think I'll buy some tea. And when a person says, I think I'll buy some tea, they've already committed themselves to 97 cents for a pound of tea. Then they pick up the tea and says $1.49. The tea people are doing that too. They're outraged all over again. So you put the tea down, and here's what they're supposed to do. Pick up things. Gelatinous, synthetic coffee, look at the prices. And then grab the fucking thing, instant, whatever it is that you can afford. And instead of putting it down, digging a hole in the shelf, walk out and don't purchase it. Go to the produce centers and pick up a head of lettuce for 19 cents. He says, you never get me to go to a produce center. Well, then stop bitching in the market. You take that action, which you can take. Now, anybody that you meet in the market, try this sometimes. While you're shopping, see one of the basket looking at things, the prices are outrageous. He says, you could say that, and they certainly are. I remember when a cup of tea was 3 cents. And then all agree. If you go to the manager of the market, there's another guy. Look, $3 for a fucking can of coffee. He says, do you know what it costs? Well, he's not about to say, if he's a good manager, he says, it's outrageous what they're charging me for. He's going to do that. And then you're going to go to the coffee bean man. And if you leave, I pay our workers $1.75 a week. They get $11 a week. Get those goddamn people. And so people do this. When I went to school, they had a drawing of a bunch of senators facing the outside of the circle. And somebody says, Senator, who is responsible for the high taxes they're getting today? And all the thumbs went right around like that in my school in the circle. That was an expression of the problem. Now, if you say, Senator, who is responsible for the new juvenile center with the arts and music, the thumb turns right around. And the thumb is on a flexible joint. And this is how it works. What's your problem? Devil, God. And so we become pointers, because we never point to solutions. We point to problems. And anyone will lend a sympathetic ear if they have that problem. Well, as far as problem solving, what I said today, I'm sure is not going to change your personality. But if it puts the ring on your finger, somewhat, 2% of the problem solving in the world. Anything else you want to discuss in terms of human stress and values? Okay, another thing that kills people is the self-image of where they ought to be in lecture. And here's something, I do something and I say, well, I should know better. I've kicked myself in the ass so many times, you can read the heel print there, the things I should have done. So here am I making another assumption, that there is something in my head that is there that is not used. That is only after the facts that you become aware of that, so to speak. So, what have you got in your head that's crippling you? What kind of processes go on in your head about what a policeman ought to do? You ought to have the courtesy of saying, pull over. Now, pull that goddamn car over. Why, nobody talks to me like that. Well, police officers step out of that car and lean against the car. Don't you treat me as a damn criminal. If the policeman has that set, lean against your fucking car. And he's more, but if you don't, you're more apt to get in all kinds of shit because you're dealing with a value system on that level. I say, now just a minute, let me describe the assumption of intellectual confrontation about your rights, unless you're a judge, unless you're a high guy in political office, You can say, let me see your identification. You can do all that. Sometimes you can scare people if you're driving the right car and look a certain way. But you put the mayor of Miami in some old car in blue jeans. Well, he's always going to speak to him a different way than he is to somebody else. So, the police officer that is unsane or a person that's unsane, we have to make accommodations. But this fucking disease that's dominant in our society called pride, nobody talks like that to me. I go in the grocery store and says, how much is a can of tobacco? He said, we'll get $9 for it. I said, you can shove it up your ass. That was a store. He says, that was a store. If I was the guy, you shove it up your ass? My wife says, are you going to let him say that? I said, yeah. In front of the children? With your mother sitting there showing you? I said, yeah. I don't understand you at all. That's true. I don't understand you at all. That's true. The assumption that we can understand each other. It's a fantastic assumption. Understand each other means knowing motivation in another person and how they arrive at decisions. If you had that, John, I can assure you, you wouldn't talk to anyone. You know what they're going to do and how they're going to answer you. So, the use of logic is a dangerous word. With logic, if I use the word logic, it has to do with the other person's self. Now, coming into that makes you very flexible, very bouncing. Now, if you ever attain that, normal people will find you contemptuous because there's no identification. If you have a different set of reactions, meaning if I tell the guy, if I say, guy says you can shove the can of tobacco up your ass, and I say, all right, but I don't say, you want to buy it? I walk away, and you say, Jesus, I said, let people talk like that to you? I said, yes, they do. And I go on. And I go on. There are a lot of people that say, the very fact that you were in that play, God Save the Children, you were in that play, and the guy walked in and says, you loused up the play. The play would have been remarkable if they didn't have you. You see? Now, is this person sincere or attacking you? They may not have identified with the character selected for that part. And you say, well, what do you mean? The person already committed themselves. And if you talk to them enough and your eyebrows move at this angle, which means you've been hurt, you know what I mean? If they move, it means you've been hurt. Now that person now reacts differently. Well, I didn't mean it that way. I mean, you're not called you me, you know, and they soft-sell it. If you feel a little better, you'll still feel uncomfortable because of the oncoming remark. So whenever you get a hard remark without inquiry, you drop it. It means there's no inquiry. That's their reaction. You can never take it that way. Now, how is it that on 4th of July, when these people light their fireworks and they go up, and he comes from another country, doesn't celebrate with him, what's going on here? Well, then you fill him in. But you don't do that with people. People are just like the 4th of July. All their reactions always cause you to be amazed at the erroneous reaction is really this thing that's erroneous. Now, later on you'll seem not to have any feelings, and that is what that means. That means that your feelings are not triggered by simplistic things. Your feelings may be triggered by significant things. Not, you look awful with that hairstyle. That doesn't get to you. But if a guy says, if you continue to burn this kind of fuel in your house, the toxic effects over a period, that's significant. And so, thank you for the information. I'm going to change my brand of fuel or change my burner or heater. That's significant. So, significance and the difference between significance and sanity. Sanity would mean that anyone that you talk to comes at you with inquiry, an attempt to understand, admission of lack of understanding. This is right. But a person that comes at you with renunciation right away, oh, you're full of shit, or whatever, that means get off. That's it. Can we go for
When you mentioned putting the can of tobacco up your ass, I worked with Rip Taylor, and one of the remarks he made was, is sitting there with the microphone in his hands as though he's about to sing a song, and he says, I have a request, but this microphone's entirely too
You probably
large.
have to say, really reading it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe a pat line.
Have you seen this movie Cuisine Suzanne?
No, really good?
It's good, I'm gonna go try to see that.
Oh,
Is it good?
I heard it's good. It's been playing for
What?
7 weeks.
What are you talking about?
It's just a romantic, it's not.
Dave Jones,
It's
mathematics
complicated.
and science and semantics.
Oh, listen, network open very soon.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
Coral.
When is
By
it?
Kaiser.
It just says coming
Oh,
soon.
what does that usually mean, a week?
Deals with
I don't know.
criticism on
You've
You
got
haven't
money.
seen network, have you?
What? Have no
On is what happens, how do people change? You brought this up, Paula. How do people change if the leaders control things, or if they can't see something? How is social change going to occur that people don't understand? Did you bring that up? If they really don't understand? All right, that wasn't your question. I know about the deans. I meant the deans. At Ranch House. Didn't you bring that up at Ranch House?
No, not the way you stated.
Well, I stated your way.
No, let me state your way. I didn't forget what we were talking
Something about the great majority of people not being interested nor concerned with social ideas, and
Oh, yeah.
how can they possibly come about? In
Well,
fact, no one seems to be concerned. Very few.
no, I think what I was saying is, since nobody is concerned, that the people who already have the control of the vested interest, and since the vested interests are not concerned,
At all.
even in a time of social breakdown, when you expect them to
They're
use
never
technology to, help us work this out, I think that's optimistic. I don't think it necessarily has to get better. I think it can get not better.
Yeah, well, that's true. I never denied that. Seems that it's moving that way. But they run out. If they don't do that, other nations will. If they don't make the appropriate changes.
Yeah, and I was also saying, it isn't even, when you get to that point, it would get bad all over, it isn't even a question of a single nation, because this is where I think everybody disagrees with me. But I still think that vested interests do cross national barriers, and I don't think when it gets to that point, one nation or the other nation, it will still be the fact that the other nations, which have their hands together across borders anyway, will keep it that way. And I'm not really happy.
I understand your point. But what you've left out is the very fact that even the fat cats go to school, collect data, use statistical mechanics, computers, and they will. And here's the message, which you really have to write down. It's essentially this: as long as you use computers, as long as you feed it opinions, you're going to get non-effective results. As long as you deal with statistical mechanics, you're going to get more effective results. And therefore, industry ultimately will work on its system in terms of energy expenditure. They have to arrive at that as an economic means of production. The next thing, after that's achieved, is they have to deal with people. People can become productive and useful entities. How that's precisely done has to be faced.
Yes, but
It's to their advantage.
the point was productive in whose terms?
Their terms.
Productive for the,
Establishment?
means one thing, and productive for a social scientist, a concerned social scientist would be another thing.
Well, a concerned social scientist does not affect social change.
No, that's the problem. The people that do generally affect social change.
Social change comes when
And that's
it is
what-
forced in. It never comes about through logic.
Right.
You can take any object at all. Take the sailboat. Well, it never came about as a result of convincing people to put up sails. Some people didn't, some did. Those that did got stuff across the ocean at a lower cost than people that rowed or depended on other means. Now, the people that had sailboats, there were many that couldn't make it, and they did this. You'll have to go refer to a book on the subject, unless anybody here remembers it. They had boats with few sails on it and stacks also. You ever see that? sales and stacks? How many of you remember that? Nobody?
In the early
Sure,
beginnings of
they
the
couldn't
scene.
quite let go. Now do you know what I mean? And nobody ever saw those pictures in the history of rolling the boats? They had sales, big, fat, moving sales and stacks.
You got the movie and make the days around the world? You have one there. What were in the stacks?
They had engines down there, but they
They
also
have
had
that, they have that
speed.
today in the motor sailors.
The motor sailor, that's right, they went back to it, just in case, well, we have to worry about that. Yeah. Well, that is a little bit of each. It's like in the jungle, my particular, this is a cartoon, you know, this particular character with a bone through his nose or earrings, you see people in Radio City with earrings. You know, they can't quite let go. I don't care if they wear earrings or not. The point is, you will continue to wear them as long as society reinforces you for it. And people don't let go of anything unless they get more from something else. And that holds for industry as well. Why should anybody change? Why should anybody buy a desk calculator? Why should any corporation come over to the engineers and say, here's a Christmas present for you? We give them desk calculators. Well, that's fine. They can do 10 times the work with it. Get more done in less time. Why does industry do that? Why does industry use adequate lighting for draftsmen? Why does industry give draftsmen pencil sharpeners instead of letting them call his own point? Now, industry eventually may give people cars to get home that are reliable. If they live far from industry, it's more efficient. It may be better for industry to send a bus around and pick up all the engineers. Eventually, it would be best for industry to design a beautiful all-glass and steel structure and put the engineers in there, pick them up in one Greyhound and bring them down instead of all those cars. Wouldn't it? In the old days, you picked up the Mexican wet packs by a big old truck, pile them in the back, and bring them to the farms. The idea, this will return, it has to, on a sheer economic basis. Now, if all the production entities, your engineers, a certain percentage of them can be out of the corporation, but if they have better nutrition, less alcoholism, less conflict with their families, you probably didn't know this, well, they have psychological consultants at very large industries. You can go in there and say, I don't get along with my wife, whatever the hell it is. And they really don't want problems with people. People under problems do not work as well. And so we are nearing the time with essential people that they're beginning to consider the physical mechanism of man as part of the productive equipment. Is that so difficult to understand? All right. They also found out that Westinghouse, that fluorescent tubes, sure, they couldn't quite let go. Now do you know what I mean? And nobody ever saw those pictures in the history of rolling boats? They had sales, big, fat, moving sales and stacks.
You got the movie and make the days around the world? You have one there. What were in the stacks?
They had engines down there, but they also had
They have
speed.
that today in the motor sailors.
The motor sailor, that's right. They went back to it, just in case well, we have to worry about that.